Well, hello everyone. Time for a new Military History Verbalized podcast, and today we have a special guest. We have a weapons troop from the US Air Force, Quinton. Hello, Quinton.
Hello, great to be here.
And Quinton, can you give us a basic overview what you're doing and what you're working on?
Okay, so I am a U.S. Air Force weapons troop. So, in short, we work with anything that has to do with weapon systems on any aircraft. Specifically for me, it's the F-16, the Fighting Falcon. So we work on the gun, we load the weapon systems, so bombs, missiles, etc. We load the ammo. We rip the guns out when they're due for maintenance, and then we also have a backshop component. So when anything that is a weapons-related component is taken off the aircraft, we send it to them, and they repair it, inspect it. And that's pretty much the gist of it for a very baseline.
Okay, about this. So basically, what do you do on a daily or weekly basis? Basically, if you're, for instance, if you're deployed in a war zone.
So day to day in, say, a war zone, because back home is a little bit different at your home base compared to being deployed. So say I was in Bagram, and we were dropping bombs on ISIS or whatever. So over there, there's always alert jets. You're doing a lot of the same stuff. You're keeping up on maintenance on the aircraft. Every piece of the aircraft that we work with usually has inspections due on it, whether it's just basically applying spray paint to keep it rust corrosion. You're obviously going to be loading a lot. The flight line component is going to be keeping jets loaded. If they're doing any sort of active missions in the area, there's always a few jets in the air. They may or may not drop their bombs, and as soon as they come back, they get refueled, rearmed, and the next 3 or 4, whoever it is, goes back up. So it's kind of a constant cycle. You're always working. The kind of work schedule is 12 hours on, 12 hours off, with 1 day off. Usually, some people get lucky if it's a Sunday, but for some people it might be a Wednesday, etc. And that's the deployed. That's when you're downrange, actually dropping munitions. Back home at your home base, so from where I'm from, here in New Mexico, we're doing the same stuff. We're doing the maintenance. Pylons may have to come down because they're doing inspection. We're a training base here, so we load inert munitions for the pilots to train with, and then we still have our backshop component. But it's the same sort of thing, but not as high of tempo. So that's here at the training base. Overseas, you're going to, so say in Korea or over in Europe, where they're in much higher potential for conflict and they're actually a combat base. They're doing the same kind of thing, usually longer hours. They're working 5 days a week on average, anywhere from 8 if you're lucky, but usually 10 to 14 hours a day. It's quite long hours, but they have a real mission to accomplish. So anytime the sirens go or they get the call to generate a sortie, everything's just go, go, go. And that might go over a weekend. You might be working 9 days in a row or more, getting a sortie ready to deploy to Syria or get ready for air defense, sort of thing.
Okay, and about the sections, you mentioned the back shop and you mentioned the flight line. Is this an organizational distinction, or is it like really a physical one? For instance, that the flight line is, I don't know, closer to the runway, and the back shop is really far behind in some hall, and you repair there. How can I imagine this, or is this very different also depending on the base layout?
So yes, it's very different location wise, base per base. For us here, our back shop is actually very close. It's, I don't even know, like a 1 minute walk from our shop, which is where basically all the offices are and where we come into work before we head out to do work. So they're usually separate. They have their own location. Backshop has to take in a lot of very heavy and large equipment, so they usually are placed in an area where they can store that equipment and so they can process it. And then the flight line people are obviously they're usually close to the actual line itself. The line, so where all the hangars are, all the hazes they call them, they can really range in distance. So here our hazes are extremely close together. All 42 or whatever it is of our hangars are very close together. They're pretty. It's because we're stateside. They don't really need to have them spaced out. Overseas, your flight line could be a 1.5 mile, 2 mile walk from one side, from the nearest hangar to the farthest. A sort of ordeal. In terms of organizational, it's a distinction. They're weapons troops. Like Backshop is weapons troops, but they don't come out not unless it's like very very rare circumstances. They're doing their own thing. They're processing all the inspections and things that are due and fixing things. Whereas we on the flight line, because that's what I currently am, we're doing the loading and the on equipment or the on the jet kind of maintenance. So they have their own chain of command. They have their own flight chiefs, which is kind of like the head of the weapon section for that area. And so yeah, it's organizational and also locational, but the location is definitely base dependent.
Okay, so basically on the flight line, there's everything that is getting ready for a mission or after mission, whereas the backshop is basically major repairs, major maintenance. Is this correct?
Yeah, it's major maintenance that has to do with weapon systems. Yes.
So, and if there's other major maintenance, where do you put then the planes?
So there's a couple of different levels of maintenance. So we have our the on equipment, so the stuff that you can do. The plane is still basically flyable. There's nothing majorly wrong with it, or a major inspection hasn't come due. They'll stay on the flight line. You go out to the hangar or whatever location it's at, and you do your maintenance there. Really in-depth maintenance, there's 2 levels of that. So one of it is called phase, which is where the jet will get taken if the base has the capability to do it. It'll be taken to a phase dock, or an area where they take off all the panels. They usually are doing non-destructive inspections on the airframe itself to make sure there's no cracks. They check pipelines. They do engine checks. They might pull the engine to check inside the engine well to make sure there's nothing wrong. Phase does a lot. That's a subsection of the crew chiefs, so the general mechanics on the aircraft. I don't know a whole lot about what they do. Like I know quite a bit, but in terms of the specifics that phase does, I do not. And then the last level is called depot maintenance, which is where the jet usually has to get sent to Hill Air Force Base, and that's where they do a complete teardown of the entire aircraft. They remove pretty much every single major component and do a full inspection to repair anything if it needs to be.
So basically, there's a clear difference between maintenance on the weapon systems and the other components.
Yeah, correct. That's why we have our own back shop. That's why we have our own, because the jet may still be able to fly, but if a pylon gets damaged or if it's not functioning properly, we take it off, replace it, and then send it to our back shop. So that way the jet can still fly its mission without having to go down for a major maintenance on our part.
Yeah, okay, that makes way more sense, because this is more mission oriented, and yeah. Very interesting. I mean, it's probably just a detail for you, but for me, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, moving to another part, I mean, you mentioned with guns, bombs, rockets, missiles, and everything. For what a very specific question from my part is basically, for instance, for the guns, what kind of ammunition do you still use? Because in the Second World War, you always hear, I mean, I also know it from games where I don't know how accurate it is. You have ball ammunition, you have incendiary, you have armor piercing, you have all these different ammo types. And for instance, for the F-16, I think it has a minigun in it. So what kind of ammo is more or less loaded into the minigun?
Okay. Yeah, so the F-16 and a lot of our jets use the M61A1 gun system. It's a 20 millimeter Gatling gun. capable of firing anywhere from 2,500 up to 7,500 rounds per minute. Very fast. And it's all depending on what it's driven by. So it can be hydraulic, electric, etc. And I can explain that a little bit more. So the different types of ammo, it's pretty standard to what you might see in video games. So take for instance, since I have experience in it and I do enjoy the game, is War Thunder. You're going to be seeing pretty much the same types of munitions you'll see in there for American aircraft. We use different belts as well, or different combinations. But the main three is going to be your API, or armor piercing incendiary, your HEI, which is the high explosive incendiary, and then you have the SAPI, or the semi armor piercing high explosive incendiaries. The most common is usually HEI. That's pretty much the go-to round because it's still a 20 millimeter. This gun system is not necessarily meant for anti-armor in any sort of way, so high explosive is usually the way to go. So it's you'll pretty much only see that, and then sometimes they'll have a little bit of a combo mix. If they are planning on strafing ground targets, they will add in the API, or the armor piercing incendiaries.
And for air-to-air combat, or is it even used for air-to-air combat? I think there was something like in the Vietnam War that you didn't have guns anymore, and then you realized they were needed again. So,
oh man, do I have an opinion on that actually? Yeah. So as you know, kind of going back a little bit, the F4 Phantom, or the F4 was originally designed with no gun system in it, and it's a big thing that they always tell pilots when they're going through the training, and it's things you can look up all the time during the Korean War, is that we were losing a lot of our jets almost 1-to-1 against the Korean fighters, but it was a 2-person jet, so they're like, the losses are very high, and they wound up developing a gun pod to stick on the center line. All of a sudden, the kill ratio start going up. They start training how to do aerial gunnery and aerial combat with this jet, instead of just relying on the extremely unreliable early versions of the AIM-9 and the AIM-7. And they went back to it and started going good. Funny enough, when you come to the F-16, that jet also was not designed with a gun system in it. The original design that Lockheed put forward with the F-16 did not have a gun system in it. So before it was actually delivered, the gun system was put in there. But from personal experience, this is kind of one of these little side stories on it. It is the most complex iteration of the M61A1 in terms of like little parts and element chutes, and the drum being in a weird spot inside the actual aircraft. Very difficult to work on sometimes. It takes a very long time to pull out and put in. So they did do it, but it was kind of shoehorned. So maintenance-wise, it's a kind of a pain.
And is it used anymore? I mean, I understand in the Vietnam War it was basically the lack of the early air-to-air missiles, which were completely unreliable, and also the technology was different. So I think back then the autocannon made sense from what I hear from you, but like later on, since the missiles got more reliable, it sounds more, yeah, it's still there, but there are different opinions on it if it's necessary or not. Is it correct?
Oh, yes. My apologies. So in terms of air combat, you can kind of look this up as well. There hasn't been any real air-to-air fighter combat in a very long time now, except for the Navy. They actually beat us, which is funny. They did the thing that the Air Force is supposed to do, and they've shot down 2 aircraft over the last, I think it was 2.5 decades. The first one was an F-14. I do believe it was an F-14. I can't remember. And then an F-18 shot something down fairly recently. So in terms of air combat, they teach aerial gunnery. They do. But like you said, with the reliability of missiles and how deadly and accurate the new iterations, such as the AIM-9X, the new Sidewinder, and the AIM-120 with its upgraded variants, they're very, very precise. You're usually engaging beyond visual range. So yes, arguably you could say that a autocannon or Gatling cannon is not necessarily needed there. However, like I said before with the HEI, comments, they do actually use the gun to strafe ground targets quite frequently.
Okay.
It's usually downrange when they're deployed. They will use that cannon to strafe ground targets. The one in the F-16 fires at about 6,000 rounds per minute, which is 100 rounds per second. You have about 5 seconds of fire time, but it is still enough to take out, like say, strafe a building or take out some lightly armored vehicles without having to use a missile system such as an AGM-65 Maverick or using a bomb. And it's a bit of a cheaper alternative, so they will use it against ground targets currently.
So ideally for strafing a column, for instance, or giving some, close air support.
Correct.
As far as I know, is this correct? Rockets are unguided and missiles are guided weapons?
Correct. Yes, that's I'm pretty sure that's actually the like dictionary classification of them. Yes.
Rockets are still used on the F-16?
So this I personally haven't dealt with at this base, and I will not be dealing with it at the bases I'll be going. But from what I have heard from other weapons troops, we do still they train with rockets. They do, but the rocket systems. So it uses allow 131, I do believe. Those are the standard 2.75 inch. Just basically, it looks like a hydropod, if you want to call it that. They're actually extremely unreliable.
Those are like on the Apache, right? Usually those round pylons with the
yeah, exactly. So the Army and the Marines still use rockets quite frequently. We train here at my base, they train F-16 pilots. Like they teach them how to fly and do air combat, and then they give them very basic how to drop bombs, like how to operate their aircraft correctly using everything in the cockpit. But when they go to a real base, they will start practicing with the munitions that they're going to be using there, because every base has its own mission. So I have heard that they have still loaded rockets. They still do it, and occasionally when they are downrange, they will use them because it's cheap and effective against soft targets. Same thing with the gun with using HEI. So they do use them. It is not very frequent though. It's a pretty infrequent thing because this is kind of breaking into the kind of the Air Force
overall mission. I mean, the Marines and the Army use probably more close air support, or have something more to do with ground targets in the Army. The Air Force, I guess.
Yeah, that would actually be fair, because they're loaded on the helicopters, and the helicopters have a little bit of a better time being able to kind of sit there and have a lot of kind of wide strafing type of weapons. So they have their autocannon in the chin, and then they have the rockets. So that's definitely a fair argument. And for us, it's more since the aircraft are coming in and doing precision strikes anyway, they usually try to use bombs or a Maverick instead of rockets.
Yeah, you have less time. You're coming from higher. You are way faster. I mean, Apache is quite slow compared to a jet fighter. Yeah.
Yeah, and then actually a little bit more on that. The personal accounts from some of my friends who have worked with rockets, and this is kind of the part of the reason why they don't use rockets for us very much. The modern military, especially the U.S. Air Force, is all about safety. The rockets and the rocket systems, especially the rocket pods themselves, not the actual rockets, but the rocket pods are very, very old. They're probably back from the Korean War, honestly, some of these pods. And they've just been kind of maintained. They're extremely unreliable, and you'll load up a jet with 2 pods of 14, and when the pilot goes to fire them, sometimes only 4 of them will fire out of the entire tube. Now, unfortunately, because of I guess fortunately it keeps us safe. Because of our safety standards, when a jet comes back and if he has tried to fire that munition and it didn't go out, it becomes a air emergency. And when he lands, he has to land in a specific area. He has to be pointing away from anything that could be harmed, and they have to have a fire response team and EOD go out to the jet just to make sure that these rockets get downloaded properly. Because technically, since the rocket has tried to fire, or supposedly the signal has been sent to the rocket, it could have ignited the motor partially, and it just didn't completely go off. There could be something shorting out that when you touch the back, it might connect again and it could fire the rocket. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong. And that's part of the reason why we don't use rockets, is because if they don't fire all of them, which is like a 95% chance that at least one rocket is going to be stuck in the tube, it creates this whole ordeal, and not really worth using it when you could just throw a GBU-38, so a JDAM on there, and do the same thing.
So, makes sense.
A little bit of administration behind why we don't use rockets anymore.
Yeah, I think something like that, a rocket going off too early was the cause for the USS Forrestal aircraft carrier fire back then. I think there was something on those.
I might have read something about that. I'm not quite aware of that, but that's very possible. Those things, they're extremely dangerous. And actually, a little funny story when you're loading them. Usually, we have the lowest ranking airmen. When you test these pods, you have to use when the rocket is loaded, we use a multimeter and we check to make sure there's no stray voltage. So you have the lowest ranking airman do it, and you have to stand back with your two hands and these long prongs, because if the rocket motor fires, you're losing your hand. So they usually have the lowest ranking guy do that. And so and sometimes they will.
A common thing, yeah, the lowest ranking do the shit job.
Yeah, it's just, and everybody's kind of wincing back if he's like, yeah, I've never loaded rockets before. It's like, oh, geez, is he going to set this one off? Nope, all right, cool. And, yeah.
Now, in terms of weapons for bombs, you're using guided and unguided bombs, I assume. Is there a major difference for you?
Yeah, kind of. So we use both dumb, so unguided and guided bombs. We have 500. There's a 250 pound, 500 pound, 1,000 pound, and a 2,000 pound variant of most bombs. It's a modular system, so every one of those classes of bombs, except for the 250, so the 500, the 1,000, the 2,000, all come in laser, GPS, and then mixed guidance. So they take a bomb body, which is the explosive part, and then you strap fins or a laser guide or whatever it's going to be turned into on the front and back, and there's your new variant of the bomb.
That's cool.
Yeah, but it's actually it's cost effective, and it's quite interesting, because if a battlefield commander is saying, because they're the ones that kind of send the orders down of what type of munitions that they want. So ammo, which are the guys that actually build these bombs, they actually literally are in the bomb dump or wherever they keep all the explosives, and they get a frag order, say like, hey, we need 50 or 20, however many JDAMs, the GBU-38's ready. They take the 500 pound Mark 82, which is just a regular dumb bomb, and then they screw the GPS on it and then the tail fins on it, and they build it, and then they send it out to us to load. But then say they want to change it to laser guide, they can just take the bombs back, take those parts off, put the laser guide part on, and send it back. So it's quite. I thought it was quite interesting when I first found out about that. I thought everything was kind of just its own type of bomb, but nope.
Yeah.
It's all based off of the same base bodies, basically.
And when do you use? You have GPS, you have laser guided, and you have mixed guidance. Okay, GPS is basically you're using the positioning system and you determine where it should go, and then it's get guided there, I assume. And laser means somebody needs to point the laser there. It could be a guy on the ground or in the aircraft. Is this still correct?
Yeah, with the laser guided system, it's they're semi-encrypted. Well, not encrypted, but basically the lasers have a specific pulse pattern to them. So you can either, someone on the ground can be pointing a laser, but you can also, the aircraft actually have pods. They have targeting pods on them, or they can be fitted with it, and they can laze their own targets, or some tactics. I don't know how often it's really used because it's not really needed, but a drone or some other aircraft with the laser can actually laze your target for you, and then you can come in for the strike. So it's used in somewhere where there might be heavy anti-air, and so you'll have a drone way up high or another jet as far away as he can be up in the clouds lasing a target, and then you'll have your other jet come in low and fast through mountain ranges, drop, and then get out as soon as he can. But he doesn't actually have to try and take the time to acquire his own target on his screen. It's already laced. He just has to come in at an attack vector and
Fire
punch
and
off his
forget,
bomb
yeah.
and get out.
And was it mixed guidance?
Mixed guidance is just it's a comment. It's the front of it. It just has a laser and a GPS in it, so it can be either or. We don't we they're loaded a bit more frequently than I would think because they're a lot more expensive and a bit more complicated to load. And I can get into the actual how these different bombs, like you asked, affect like my job and stuff like that for loading procedures. But yeah, it's basically it's got the GPS unit in it and it's got a laser seeker in it. So the pilot can choose which one he wants depending on what he's dropping it on. So that's more for if they don't know, like if they're flying close air support, but they're waiting for troops in contact. So they're waiting for something to happen, so they don't know what kind of targets they're going to have to hit. GPS is good, and it's an easy fire and forget. It works in all weather, but laser allows you to actually track moving targets. So,
Yeah.
say it's a convoy, they can use the laser part, but if it's just like a building and there's really bad cloud cover or they don't know how the weather's going to act up, they could use the GPS. Or so it's just a combination of both.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting that you can use laser. Of course, you can use it on moving targets and on static targets. Yeah, you use the.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very interesting. And you mentioned for you there's a difference if you're loading them, those weapons, in what way?
Most of the guided munitions. So everything goes up on the rack the same. It goes up, and there's these hooks that grab onto these little lugs that lock the bomb into place, and then you sway it. So there's these little feet on the side of the pylon that hold the bomb in place so it doesn't rock back and forth while you're flying. That's mostly the same. What really changes between munitions is so a GPS guided bomb has to have a cable that connects to it. So these are like really minor things. It's only like a couple of seconds or like maybe a minute, depending on which type of rack you're loading it on. But the GPS guided bombs, they actually communicate with the aircraft, so they have a cable. And then laser bombs do not. And then there's a lot of bombs that actually have wires. I know this is going to sound extremely archaic, but a dumb bomb actually has wires that we have specific specifications that we're supposed to cut them to, and they actually hold the fuse in the front from spinning, and then it also usually pulls the activation usually something to activate. So on a laser guided bomb, there's fins in the back that pop open. So it's quite literally just a cable that is run through a switch, like a mechanical switch, and when the bomb drops, it pulls on the cable and pops the switch, and then just opens the fins. It's a very basic, you can't jam it or anything like that, and it's the same thing on the dumb bombs. It's just a cable that's popped through something, and it's got a little, like, I don't know what you call it. It's like I got a little wedge on the end, basically, a little clamp, and it just pulls on out and allows it to freely spin. Super simple.
Yeah, if it works, I mean, it's usually better. I mean, if you can jam it or damage it in other way, it's excellent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's super simple. I thought, like, when I first got in, I thought it was just kind of, they had a pin or something that they would pull, and then when it actually dropped, it would had like sensors or something in it. Nope, just a cable, all mechanical.
And in regards to the missiles, you have the Maverick, and are there other air-to-ground missiles you operate on?
Yeah, there's a few. So main air to ground for the F-16 is the AGM-65 Maverick, and then the AGM-88, HARM, also known as the high-speed anti-radiation missile. So that one is used for suppression of enemy air defenses, or SEAD missions. Basically, it just locks onto a radar target. So whether it's a SAM site or like a Tunguska or something that has active radar, and it just locks onto it passively, flies to it as fast as possible, and detonates. So it's if there's enemy air defenses, which is there's a squadron called Wild Weasel, which is actually where one of the squadrons I'm going to over in Korea. Their whole mission is just to destroy anti-air defenses with aircraft. So they have a mantra called "You got to be shitting me," because they started this way back in, I do believe, the first Wild Weasel squadron was done with F4s.
Yeah, I think also too in Vietnam. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was their mantra, because I mean, you're using aircraft to take down anti-aircraft defenses, but they're very effective. The enemy can't really see that they're coming in unless they see the launch, or if they have a different type of radar that's actually actively scanning and they see it coming towards them. So they have two choices: they can either let it hit, or they can turn their radar off.
Yeah.
So,
Basically, you respond or you don't respond or you get hit. Yeah.
and either way, if they shut their radar off, it's the same effect. So, but those are the two main ones that we use for air to ground. There are technically the F-16 can load a bunch of other air to ground munitions, but we do not use them. We do not really actively use those weapons.
And the Maverick, what kind of guidance system does it have?
It uses many different types. It depends on the model. So the AGM comes in two major flavors, which is the high explosive anti-warhead, or sorry, the high explosive anti-tank warhead, which is the normal tank buster one, and then it comes in a 300-pound ish. It's like there's also a blast fragmentation version, and then so those two types both have a electro-optical, so guide by wire, so you're flying it with the camera. It has a laser guided. Oh, and then it has infrared. It has like a heat-seeking type automatic deal. So you can get them in any flavor. You can get them in those two flavors of explosives with those three different types of guidance systems.
Heat seeking for ground targets?
Yeah, they can. It will. The targeting pod, or actually the pilot, can look directly through the Maverick when he's targeting and use its camera to target, or he can use his targeting pod, which will also communicate with the missile, and he can designate a target, and it will. Yeah, it uses the heat.
Okay. It uses the heat signature of an existing vehicle, and yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking like basically blind firing, and it moves to the hardest area. Yeah, okay, that was like a dumb thought on my part.
I mean, potentially. I don't really know about. I don't know the specifics on its like its what do you call it? Like the computer on board, but that would not be surprising to me if it had a dumb fire mode where it would try to seek something out. Probably highly frowned upon, just in case you're hitting something random like another aircraft, which would be hilarious.
And about so you mentioned the fragmentation round. This is for soft targets. If you use it against soft targets.
Yeah. Yes, it would be. That would be the one you want to use against softer targets or hitting a building or a group of people if you wanted to. However, I do believe it's been effectively used against some fairly heavy armor just because of the sheer amount of explosive that's in it. Because as much as say, going into War Thunder again, say as much as people would say, you need to have this much penetration to get through a tank, I'm pretty sure 300 pounds of high explosive right on the armor would at least crush in the hull.
Yeah. Or you kill the passengers, the crew.
Oh, most definitely. They would not be feeling too great after getting hit by one of those.
Because sometimes I think the armor can survive, but the crew is basically out of action.
Correct.
I mean, you don't have this. I mean, in War Thunder terms, it would be you unconscious.
Yeah.
Because you can't die in War Thunder.
Crew knocked out.
Yeah, crew knocked out. Yeah, like crew knocked out from hitting a bench.
Yeah, that or a hull break on literally anything. Doesn't matter how much armor you have, it's gonna crush that superstructure. So
now, in terms of, I have a more or less a trivia question. There's this out there on, I think about the Vietnam War, where they put a toilet instead of a bomb, or they put the toilet around the bomb in the Vietnam War, and and they dropped it on the enemy accordingly. Would you? I mean, if who did this was basically also weapons troops, I assume.
Problem. That sounds like something we would do. That's for sure. I mean, back then, definitely they could have gotten away with stuff like that for sure. Nowadays, probably not. You'd probably get in trouble for something like that.
Yeah, I can assume. It's probably too politically incorrect, and this is not
Oh,
gonna fly well.
oh yeah, not in today's. No, that definitely not. We're not even allowed to. And I'm kind of sad about this. You know how back in the day you would always see the paint jobs on the aircraft, the tiger teeth, the crazy paintings,
Yeah.
the bomb kills and stuff like that. We actually sometimes they'll do it when they're overseas. If they're downrange, if a jet goes up and gets a couple of kills over the course of a week, the crew chief will proudly do his little bomb decals, but they usually get painted over, and pretty much every aircraft is just boring old Air Force gray. There's no fun camouflages anymore, except for the A-10s. Those definitely still have their viper teeth and the warthog and the shark teeth on them. Those are probably the only ones I've seen in active duty that have a fairly interesting paint job on them.
Do you know why the A10 is still allowed the paint job and everything?
I don't have a specific on that, but I would guess it's because that thing has been around for so long and it is so incredibly effective that the the maintenance personnel were just like, look, we want to keep this because it's a symbol of the old times, and it's just it. I mean, they just look mean. It's a there's definitely. I mean, if you've ever read or heard about it, the just the engine sounds flying over sends fear through people who are on the other side of it or know what it is. There's some personal accounts of fighters who have had to be on the receiving end and survive, and it's a there's some mental there's a huge mental thing to it. Just hearing the engines go over and not knowing where it's going to strike, and then you hear the crackling of the 30 mil hitting the ground, and then the buzz, the burt as it is, coming out of nowhere, and then you don't know where it's going, can't hear it because it's quiet, and it strikes again. So I think it's just part of that. I think it's a lot of pride with the maintenance personnel that work on that aircraft. They wanted to keep it. So
Yeah, okay, makes sense. And the other thing is, I always see these writings on the bombs, like you see, yeah, special message or Easter egg for Hitler and stuff like this. Is this still common, or is this also basically
not at all. It's with the same thing with like you had said, being more politically correct, which um personally I think it's funny because the people have tried to write things on there and they usually get in trouble, and the reasoning is that's offensive to the people that were around. And I'm just kind of like, more offensive than dropping a bomb on
yeah,
them?
it's not.
It's a little funny. It's not a huge deal. They do it sometimes, but anytime I've seen it, searching on different, I guess, like the Reddit military sub and a couple of other places, you'll see it on. There's a bunch of Facebook groups that are like so maintainer humor or something like that. You'll see it. They're usually memes though. There was a set of bombs that I saw with a spray paint that said "bombs out for Harambe." Haha, back when that used to be funny, if it ever was.
Yeah, it's the Harambe meme never really caught on to me. I don't know. It's I think this is one of those that really didn't translate well to Europe.
Hey man, it was just honestly there was nothing to translate. It was literally just a lot of memes are just kind of that's what they are, just kind of dumb. So no reason, but yeah, there is some actual merit to it, I will say, because there's a lot of contracting that goes on in the military in general. Pretty much every aspect of everything that a military person will do. There's that you're in some way there is some civilian aspects. So for us, which I thought was interesting when I first got in, but it makes sense now, is like they're putting up say they put up a new fence on your base or like somewhere like that. Usually civilian contractors are actually on base doing that. So some civilian company from the local area doing the fence work. They obviously have to get clearance and everything and do background checks, but they'll be doing that. It's the same thing overseas. At some of the European bases, there are local nationals that are working there. So if it was the bases in Italy, there's actually Italian personnel and also Italian military working on the base with us. So overseas, they actually do have, depending on which Middle Eastern base it is, they'll have people of the local area who are business owners working on base. They might be doing something simple like doing food or sanitation or something like that. But It would make sense to, if they did catch us putting, derogatory terms on a bomb, they might not like that. It makes it easier for them to sympathize with the local extremists if they want, and since they're on base, they could potentially try and cause some, not havoc, but some trouble. So it makes a little bit of sense, but
Yeah, in that
would,
sense, it makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, it would be really funny to drop a toilet on someone, though. I do. I would say that would be probably a highlight of my career if I had gotten to see that.
Yeah. Now, moving to something on the lighter side, what do you really like on your job? What do you think is great? For instance, I don't know, what kind of aspect do you like most about the aircraft or the weapons or doing your job?
All right. So, so I don't know what kind of audience you have, but if there are other maintenance personnel, especially in the Air Force, that are listening to it, I think that a weapons troop is one of the, I guess from the outside, the coolest, one of the coolest jobs you can have in the maintenance world. So we work next to crew chiefs, or the kind of general mechanics, but they do a lot more stuff on the aircraft than we do, because they're dealing with pretty much everything. And then you have specialists, or specs. So they're the guys that work with all the avionics and the electronics. So yeah, that's kind of cool. We call them nerds a lot, because that's what a lot of them are. You'll see them playing Magic and all that kind of stuff, like in their office when they're not doing anything. And they work with a lot of computer stuff on the aircraft. Crew chiefs change the oil, if any. Well, them and engines troops. So the engines guys that work specifically with the engine. They do the oil. They change tires. They do basically all the basic checks for the aircraft to fly. But I mean, what can I say? It's pretty awesome to be able to say that I load high explosives onto a jet that goes like Mach 1.5, and it goes in and drops these, and it's pretty satisfying, actually. I haven't gotten to experience it, but I have heard first account from other people is there's no other feeling when you scramble to load up a jet as fast as possible. It takes off with its two wingmen, and it comes back with nothing on it. So they've dropped every single munition. So I think it's really cool. There's a lot of pride with weapons troops. A lot of them feel the same way that we have. That a lot of them will say that they think that we're the most important job, but I really won't cut into that, not to anger anybody. But it's definitely cool. It's definitely got that little bit of it's got that vibe to it.
Yeah, I mean, you're as closest to the action as possible without being the actual pilot, you could say.
Yeah, it's kind of what they always tell us is like technically everybody's directly involved with the mission. Some people are more directly involved, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And so there's that part with the actual job and how I feel about it. Now, so the aircraft itself, funny enough, which I can go into if you like. So the F-16 is extremely hard to work on. It's on paper, it's an amazing aircraft. It's everything's routed in very small spaces. There's wires running through conduits and all this stuff. It's very compact. There's a lot of stuff packed into a very small package. But when you try to work on that, you have to go through all of that crap to get to like some simple component that needs to get replaced. Like if a relay goes bad or something, you usually have to rip apart a wing in order to get to it, or you have to rip out a hydraulic drive or something like that. So it's compact, but it's not very maintenance friendly. Personally, I can't really. I'm looking forward to working on other aircraft. I want to get the experience in it. As a weapons troop, there's a certain part in your career where you've done enough, or it's a very specific training. We have books these little booklets that we read called CDCs, or basically just on our job. It's upgrade training. So once we reach a certain level, we can work on any jet, but crew chiefs are usually stuck, and so are avionics, or not so much avionics, but crew chiefs are kind of stuck. Like they can go to other aircraft, but they have to be further along in their training. Usually at the staff sergeant type rank, so E5, someone who's been in about 5 or 6 years. They have the opportunity to go to other aircraft, but they also have to go through a lot more training. So their stuff is much more specific to each aircraft. For us, the bomb racks and the gun systems are actually, they're used on a lot of other aircraft. So like I was saying, the M61 A1 gun system is used in the F-15. So you already know how to work on that. You already know how to do it. You just need to learn the specifics of how that gun is set inside the aircraft, which is actually simpler, much simpler on an F-15. And the same thing with bomb racks. So like the MAU-12 bomb rack, the main heavy-duty, heavy-lifting one that can basically, I think it has a capacity of something stupid like 8,000 pounds that it can carry. That bomb rack is the same in all aircraft that use it. So there's not a whole lot to it. So you can easily swap from aircraft to aircraft.
Oh. And what aircraft would you love to work on next?
I'm definitely looking forward to being able to work on the F-15s because it's going to be something different. It's another fighter. However, if I could choose anything, it would be definitely the A-10, the legendary A-10. I wanna get in there. I want to get hands on because I mean, anybody who likes aircraft and aircraft history loves that GAU-8 gun system in there. And I think it's awesome to have the opportunity, just because I love playing around and taking things apart, mechanically minded. I think it'd be awesome to actually like basically get intimate with that system. It's already pretty interesting with the M61 because it is a 20 millimeter Gatling system, but it's just the A-10 has such a mantra around it, and everybody who's worked on it says they love that aircraft. There's some things on it that are a pig to work on, but I don't think I've met one person that has worked on A-10s that said that they would rather work on F-16s or some other fighter. They love that aircraft.
That's really interesting because the A-10 has quite a reputation, but I only heard it from civilians so far, so you never really know how it translates. But in this case, it sounds the reputation inside the Air Force is even way higher than how outside of it.
Oh yeah. There would have been a lot of angry maintenance personnel and pilots if they had when they were trying to kill the A-10 for the 5th time or whatever, however many times they've tried to kill it now. Oh, there would have been so many angry personnel within the Air Force. That was not going to happen.
Yeah, I heard that I was like, is it still around? Because I heard so many times that it will get phased out and they will stop and there's nothing more going on. Okay, that's really interesting. Is there any other plane that has like this kind of reputation within the Air Force?
There's planes that have bad reputations. I'll tell you that. There's planes that definitely have bad reputations.
Which ones?
First positive. Usually when people do, it's the older guys. It's the people that have been in for 15, 20 years that have worked on different aircraft. I actually just heard it today because I'm doing my paperwork to get out of here. I don't remember what the designation was, but one of our chief master sergeants here was talking about how he loved the Aardvark. He used to work on that aircraft, and he loved that one. He said it was fairly easy to work on, and it was just one of his favorite aircraft he had ever worked on. So it's usually older aircraft that have a better reputation in general. But as far as to the level of the A-10, I don't think anything has that. Some of the crew chiefs came from heavies, so the transport aircraft, so C-130s, C-17s, C-5s. Those are called heavies. They love their heavies. They don't like the fighter world. They don't like working on fighter aircraft. They like working on their C-130 because they're doing all their checks and stuff, and they can just get inside, close the door, and roam around inside and do their own thing while they might maybe have a radio going or something. And you can't do that on the 16.
Yeah, so, it's a bit more narrow.
Yeah, and then in terms of negative, definitely the 16. A lot of people have negative thoughts of the 16 in general because, like I said, it is a pain in the ass to try and work on. There is a lot of small stuff, like things you got to fit your hand through and like try and undo a bolt without dropping it. That's the other thing that sucks is if you drop it, you are spending however many hours it takes to find that little tiny nut. Yeah. Even if it fell all the way through the jet. People don't actually. A lot of people don't like C-130s. Some of the people that came from them, they say they're pieces of crap because they're very old at this point. And then bombers. Definitely bombers. Weapons troops in general don't. Some people love bombers because when I guess it made sense when I kind of thought about it. So loading up a 16 with like 4 bombs, 4 missiles, chaff flare, and its ammo, yeah, it can take a good crew, like a really really fast weapons crew, and it's like you're generating for a sortie, like real world stuff is happening. It can take them 20 to 30 minutes to load the jet, which is that's very very fast. That's a extremely good crew. Some people would probably boast they could do it faster. I don't really remember for times. But a bomber, like a fully laden B-52, that takes all day. That takes an entire shift to load. So I don't remember, like 72 500-pound bombs, depending on the configuration. It takes a while.
Yeah,
So,
that's some heavy lifting.
oh yeah. So weapons troops kind of hate it sometimes because they're like, man, I've done nothing today except for load bombs. But then other people are super happy because like, man, I've done nothing but load bombs today, and because they don't have to do any other crap. They load the jet and then they go home, kind of thing. So
I guess it depends if one is into variation or if you just want to do simple shop. Yeah.
Yeah, and on that, there's actually there's a definite split in the weapons guys. A lot of people there are some people that really pride themselves and are very good and very efficient at doing loading, and they love it. But then there's other crews, like personally myself, I like doing maintenance. I like working. I actually, as much as I've said it's really crappy to work on the M61, I like working on the gun system. I like doing maintenance. It's not as monotonous because loading is the same thing every single time. In fact, we have to keep up on our training. Once a month, we're supposed to go and actually make sure that we are still capable of loading ammunition safely and within a reasonable time. It's called Load Barn, and we have other weapons troops who are very good loaders, usually. Most of the time, they're pretty good. Watch us, and they time us, and we have to do everything by the book safely and as fast as possible. So, and in fact, out of that, in Korea, they do it the peninsula-wide one. The people that have done the best, so the fastest times with the least amount of discrepancies, so the safest and the fastest, actually compete with each other. We have competitions where the 2 best load crews of the 2 different units will they'll do a face-off with 2 different jets, and people come and spectate. Like, people come and watch this from base, like from all sorts of different career fields. They may not even be maintenance. They might be finance or someone who works in an office, and they'll come out and they'll watch people just load these jets as fast and as safely as possible. It's a pretty huge thing within the weapons community. But yeah, we literally have competitions on who can load aircraft the fastest. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that could actually be really interesting to watch to a certain degree. I mean, especially, I think it could be even appeal for the general public if you have proper commentary on it as well. For instance, explaining some stuff besides that would be really interesting. But I guess it's OPSEC to film that and comment everything.
Actually, no. You can find videos on YouTube specifically of the Korean. It's called the Peninsula-wide load comp is what it's called, load competition. You can find them on YouTube. It's actually, like I said, it's a huge spectacle. They actually let Korean nationals come on base. I think it depends on who they are. Come on base and watch, and the Korean Air Force actually competes with us. Usually winning because they don't have as many safety regs. They don't have to follow as many safety regulations and do quite as many like little checks and stuff. So they usually do it faster. But yeah, no, it's actually a huge thing. You can find it on YouTube. I would be happy in the future either providing commentary or watching it at the same time and kind of explaining what you're seeing them do. But yeah, no, you can find it. It's quite interesting.
Well, we covered a lot. Is there anything you want to add, or you want to expand further?
The air-to-air missiles, although I guess that was kind of answered a bit earlier. It's pretty simple. We have basically a heat seeker, which is the AIM-9. The heat seeker, very maneuverable, and the AIM-120, which is a long-range, semi-radar guided or fully active radar guided air-to-air. It's a technically it's medium range, but it can strike out pretty far.
The one is the Sidewinder and the other is the Sparrow?
We don't actually know. So sorry, the AIM-9M or the AIM-9LM and the X variant are called Sidewinders. The AIM-120 is called an AMRAAM. It's the Advanced Medium Range Anti-Air Missile, and literally just call them AMRAAMs. The AIM-7 Sparrow, which you were just mentioning, we don't actually use that anymore. The only branch that uses that is the Navy.
Ah, okay. And the Phoenix is also a Navy weapon?
Oh, the Phoenix is also Navy, and that was only specifically used on the F-14. The F-14 Tomcat was the only aircraft that was, as far as I know, that was produced. I'm sure other aircraft could carry it. Was the only aircraft that ever carried it, and I do believe it was only used once in combat. And I don't believe it was American either. It was a Israeli. I don't quote me on that though, but it was only ever used once. So.
Well, Gwen, a very interesting talk. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
And people, if you want to know, Quentin also has a YouTube channel. Right now, there's only gaming content, but there might be potentially some military content in the future. And
That is
I
correct.
will put it in the I put a link in the description. So if you want to check it out, head over. And so, everyone, thank you for listening. See you next time. Bye.